Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today I have a very special guest. Her name is Cynthia Chin-Lee, and we actually know each other for the past several months. And Cynthia is a children's book author, a high-tech retiree, and a cancer thriver. And that's actually what we have in common. But her story goes a month after retiring from a career in high tech, she received a diagnosis of cancer. And, as anybody knows, that rocks your world and people react so very differently. And I think that's a wonderful way to enter into this picture. A terrible thing to have in common, but as it turns out, we can turn these things into an inspiration and a tool, a pathway to health. Cynthia, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Joe. I'm doing well.
So we have in common a connection with Dr. Hoffman and a Sunday afternoon call where many people who are going through surviving cancer and survivors and people learning about how to do that, get together and share our thoughts and ideas. But you certainly have an incredible story, and I'd sure love to hear a little more about it.
Sure. A month after I retired from my high-tech career and I was enjoying myself, and then I went for my annual mammogram, and the doctor said, "Well, I think we see something." And I got called back. The first argument I had was when the doctor suggested biopsy because my husband, whose father had passed away of lung cancer and had a biopsy, was a subject of controversy because, as we know, biopsy and surgery can sometimes cause cancer to spread.
Yeah,
But
that's actually a crazy piece of my story too, because I had this giant lump sticking out of my neck, and they were telling me, well, the only way we're going to know for sure what it is to take a biopsy. But my first instinct was, well, I don't want that because
yeah,
you're going to spread it. I mean, but then they're telling me that there's no way to know beyond a shadow of a doubt what it is unless you take a piece out. So what was your thoughts on that?
so, I wanted to know what I had. My
Mhm.
husband didn't want me to do the biopsy, but I decided I would take the risk. And
Okay.
later, when I did more research, I did find that the statistics for biopsy seeding cancer, at least for breast cancer, is about 3%.
Yeah.
So
And
you have to weigh the pros and cons. And so I
exactly. Everything seems to be a double-edged sword in this world.
said,
There's no like for sure this will help you or hurt you.
right. So I ended up doing the biopsy, and they said, yeah, it's invasive lobular carcinoma. Fortunately for me, it's a estrogen positive breast cancer, which if you're going to have a breast cancer, it's good to have, a hormone positive breast cancer because they have drugs, medicines that can help you.
Isn't it wild? Like for people who don't know anything about cancer, that's like they think it's just this one word and it means this one thing, but it means so many different things. And the causes of cancer many times affect the ways that it can be treated and even the survival rate. Like in my situation, it was the same thing. Mine was HPV driven instead of bad choices driven. And it made the difference between a 45% survival rate and a 95% survival rate and different treatment options. So you were in the same situation.
Yeah. So, going to a regular doctor, the opinion was surgery and
Of
radiation
course.
and do it within 30 days.
Right.
And I went back and I did more research, and I was lucky because I had a friend, Sue Ann Kaiser, who's another children's book author, and I had seen her get breast cancer 18 years earlier.
Okay.
She did surgery, but when the doctors went back and said more surgery, you didn't get clear margins, as they call it. So they didn't cut away all the cancer, she said no. She stepped back, she
Yeah.
changed her diet, she started doing lots of things. And I witnessed that just as a
Yeah.
friend. So when
Nice.
I got my diagnosis, I called her up and I said, "Okay, Sue Ann, tell me how you did it. What'd you
Yeah.
do?" And I realized that there are a lot of other treatments that are less invasive than surgery and radiation.
Well, the problem with surgery, people don't realize, people are like, oh, just cut it out. But the problem with cancer is any little bit that's left behind is going to spread. And you're in there looking around and you might not see it all. And, the scans can see it, but the human eye can't necessarily see it. And there might be cellular masses that aren't big enough to even see that they think they cut away. And unless it's somehow encapsulated, there's no way to be sure. And, they go and almost like give you some extra time, but that cancer grows fast as it can.
Yeah, what makes it worse is they've done a lot of animal studies and they show when you surgically remove the primary tumor, you actually stimulate the other cancer that's floating around in your body. So there's a possibility that surgery is making things worse.
Exactly. Yeah, people don't know about circulating tumor cells that are
Mhm.
just literally like as soon as a mass gets big enough, it starts breaking pieces off and just floats around the blood, just looking for another place to land. And there's
Mhm.
no way to catch it. It's just there until you make them die.
Yeah. So I gently told my doctors that, hey, you know what? I really don't want to do surgery. Give me at least 6 months and I'm going to change my diet and I'm going to do supplements and I'm going to do letrozole, which is the hormone blocker.
Okay.
And they said, we normally don't give you letrozole until you do surgery. You must do
Right.
surgery first, right?
Yes.
And I said, well, please, give it to me before surgery. And
Let's
in
try it.
six
Yeah.
months, if things get really wildly bad, then maybe I'll consider surgery.
You can always go and get surgery, but you can't unget it once you have it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I was very fortunate. I found Mark Simon and Dr. Hoffman and the methionine restrictive diet, which is pretty much a low protein, whole food, plant-based diet.
A rough road.
Yeah.
So tell
I
me, how
said,
did you find Dr. Hoffman? Because I'd like to hear about how everybody
sure.
stumbles into his world.
So I found Dr. Hoffman through Mark Simon with
Okay,
the Oncology Research Institute. They used to do the Zooms together, and
got
then
it.
then they kind of like do them separately.
Got it.
But I also found Mark Simon through Chris Wark. Have you
Okay.
heard of Chris? Yeah, he has a program called Chris Beat Cancer,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah. I've read his book and I know who he
right.
is.
So I, did his program,
Mhm.
and then through um,
It's a lot
people
of
like
diet mostly. It's a
Feeling
big,
Strong. Have you heard of Feeling Strong?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, through Healing. So I went on his website and I said, "Oh, there's this support group called Healing Strong." So I kind of joined Healing Strong for a few
Okay.
years. And then from a woman I met through Healing Strong, she strongly encouraged me to look at Mark Simon, and then
Got
Mark
it.
encouraged me to look at Dr. Hoffman's stuff. So I've done methionase and
Mhm.
I do the low methionine diet. But it basically worked for me,
Yeah.
so what was
So
very
tell me what
interesting.
happened. Like you started taking the hormone blocker, you shifted your diet. Did you start taking the methionine right away, or did you?
I did not take it right away because I don't think I was a perfect candidate for it.
Okay.
So I was taking the nutritional oncology's nutraceuticals, the Nori
Okay.
nutraceuticals, and then about yeah, 6 months after my diagnosis, I was lucky in that I had a clinical trial for imaging. So
Okay.
for women, it's mainly women with estrogen positive breast cancer. They have a PET scan that's estrogen based.
Oh,
So for people that don't know, very often cancer is imaged through a PET scan. And the
right.
PET scan, the standard is a glucose PET scan.
Correct.
But because I had estrogen positive breast cancer, qualified for this clinical trial of an estrogen PET scan. So it was an NIH Department of Defense clinical trial. So I got my baseline estrogen PET scan at the beginning of my diagnosis, and it confirmed the biopsy, which was high intake of estrogen on my right breast at the same spot. And then as part of the clinical trial, you do another estrogen PET scan. They call it a mammy PET,
Okay.
MAMMI. So it's a mammy PET after 6 months. So it's really ironic, but the same week that I get this phone call from UCSF, I'm in the Bay Area, so
Okay.
UCSF is where I got my medical care. They called me and said, "Hey, you missed your appointment for the anesthesiologist." And I said, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, you have surgery scheduled for next week."
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. And I said, "No, just cancel that, please."
Yeah. I think we'll pass on the surgery. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on the surgery. But that week, I also had my second mammy PET, the second PET scan, and the
Uh-huh.
PET scan showed that there was no uptake of estrogen, so basically no evidence of disease.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, the PhD person that was doing the PET scan, she was really happy. She said, "Come over here and take a look at this." Not that I could really
Nice.
interpret it. She said, "You have reversed it." So that was just great news. I continued on though. I mean, I don't take it for granted. And then at one point, I think like a month or two later, I felt like I was getting too little protein, and I
Mhm.
wanted to. I did a blood test, and that kind of confirmed it. But I also
Yeah.
had symptoms, so I wanted to
It's hard to
increase.
get protein on that diet. It's a
Yeah,
rough,
right.
rough
Yeah,
road.
I wanted to eat a little more protein, and that's when I went on methionase.
Okay.
Because Mark said, "Hey, talk to Dr. Hoffman. If you're going to even increase your plant-based protein,
Right.
you should take the methionase." So that's when I went on methionase.
So, the thing is once you have mutated cells, once you have a mass of any kind, you have a problem for life. It doesn't, it's you have circulating tumor cells. There's no way to detect it. I mean, you can test for markers. You can test for, like in my case, it's a virus, so they have a test they can detect the virus presence in my blood. And if it's not there, well, the particular cancer that I have caused by that virus is probably not going to be there. But that doesn't mean something else or something hasn't mutated. I mean, there's just no way, there isn't really a fail safe. So once you know that, your body has mutated in this way, there's a high likelihood that it'll do it again if given the chance. And that gives you kind of a life's work of not giving it a chance.
That's right. And you're lucky you have a marker test. So I also have a blood marker test that I can do. It's the
Nice.
CA15-3. And the other good part about my cancer journey was I would go in for a scan every 6 months, and it's an ultrasound. And
Oh,
again,
good.
this is something I had to negotiate with my doctors. The doctors want to do MRI with gadolinium, and
Yes.
I just had read so much negative stuff about gadolinium. I said, no. I said,
Yeah.
I'll do an MRI without the gadolinium. And then they said, well, that's not going to help us, or they can't get off of their protocol.
I
So I
know. They're
said,
so stuck on their
they're
standard
very
of
stuck
care.
in the protocol. So I said, well, hey, I won't do the MRI with contrast, but I'll do ultrasound and I will do mammogram. So I would go in every 6 months for my ultrasound. I'm still doing it. And like within a year and a half, my tumor shrank down to not detectable.
I love it. So this
Yeah.
is something that I experienced, and I'm sure you did as well. So you have this sort of, I don't know, dance you have to do with these physicians, like
Hmm.
there are things that only a doctor can order. You can't, like in my case, I requested this particular chemo cocktail. I can't go to Amazon and order it. You have to have a physician approve it. Insurance has to deal with it. And so you have to have a friendly relationship with these people that are there to uh, assist you, help you, heal you, bring you whatever it is you need. But the truth is, you're the one who has to be in control, and you have to kind of manage that. And some doctors are more, I don't know, opinionated or forceful or strong-willed than others, and others will listen. So, how did you find your experience with these doctors? Surgery, you can always say no to a surgery, but when it comes to scans and procedures and tests and things like that, like they get it in their mind it has to be this way, and you have to in some way convince them that you're not fighting them, but you just don't want this thing.
Yeah, I have to negotiate it with the doctors, and sometimes they'll listen and sometimes they won't. For some of the blood tests, like the marker for my breast cancer, they won't do because they said they don't believe in it, so I pay out of pocket.
Yeah,
But a few of the things I've convinced them to order the blood test, like they ordered the blood test for B12 and vitamin D, because those are markers that they said, okay, we know you're vegan, so yeah, you want to have the test. So they ordered it. It's also the same way with the imaging. I had to negotiate with them, like, okay, I'll do this, I'll do the ultrasound, but I won't do the MRI with heavy contrast.
right.
Yeah, you
Yeah, it's the
just,
same. These scans, people don't realize that the amount of radiation and the contrast agents, and some of these can be extremely toxic. And it's not like you get it once. Like, you're going to be scanned fairly regularly for probably the rest of your life, and you have to determine for yourself how much of that are you willing to take, and is there some other way. And like, my experience is that they don't tell you about any other thing. Like, they say this is what we're going to do, and you're either going to say yes or no to it. But it's on you really to figure out what other options are out there, and maybe even looking at different doctors. Like, I was lucky that Dr. Hoffman recommended Dr. Castro, who was local to me, who is a genetic brilliant man, and understands a lot of things about cancers and repurposed drugs and other ways around things that many doctors wouldn't. And my insurance happened to cover him as well, so I was able to go and see this other doctor. But you're up in the Bay Area, that's quite a trek down. There's probably another integrative oncologist or somebody who has other thoughts and ideas if you needed. But how do you find them? It's this sort of maze, and turns out a big network is a big deal.
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I was lucky that UCSF had an integrative oncologist, but it was funny because he did not even agree with my going plant-based.
Really?
He just said reduce your meat. But, he was the one that ordered some of the blood tests for me. And that's why I'm so grateful for Dr. Hoffman Zoom and Mark Simon Zoom,
Yeah.
because there's really a community of the patients, the cancer patients who want to do the integrative and less invasive treatments. And we learn from one another so much.
It's such an important tool, and I'm always talking about that call. I mean, I haven't been on Mark Simon's call, but I'll probably join that one day, simply just because the experience of all these different people is where I've gained so much knowledge and even ideas. Like Dr. Exume and some of his things, and him and I have become close, and just meeting with people like you and I are getting to know each other, and turns out we've got a lot in common. And I think that, when you go to a doctor, they read out of a playbook. They have their standard of care that they're trained, and depending on what their specialty is, they're going to have their playbook. And I had a surgeon tell me one thing. I had a radiation oncologist tell me, well, don't do the surgery. And then I have medical oncologists tell me, well, you have to do the radiation and the chemo. And then I had an integrative oncologist through UCI. So we're both in the same UC system, but I'm in UC Irvine. And she had a lot of great ideas and she has never got back to me. And so this is all, and this is after I had a internal medicine say you probably don't have cancer. So, I let mine sit for 9 months just thinking I was going to get over it. And, these doctors, many people, when they get diagnosed, I think they just automatically just do what they're told. And I think that's where so many problems come from. And I part of it, I think, is it takes a special kind of person that just says, obviously you have a tremendous will to live because you went through the effort. I'm the same way. I mean, I love every minute of my life. And I was like, I'm not going to risk. Once I realized I was facing a difficulty like that, I was like, well, I'm not going to stop till I solve this thing. Is that kind of what drove you?
Yeah, I believe in questioning authority. And I have a blog for anyone who might want to read it. It's cynthiachinley.com/blog. And I think there are lots of truths that we live our life. And we also see that society will perpetrate many untruths or evil or, you know, and we have to question all those
Yeah,
things.
indeed. Yeah, I think that as we're going through, like, I don't know about you. Once my community, I've been an activist for many years on a lot of levels, and I question everything as well. I think we have a lot of that in common. But I had a lot of people that, cared. I've helped a lot of people with cancer. I've been working with cannabis medicine for 40 years and made cannabis oil, and it's helped a lot of people. It didn't help me, but it's helped a lot of people. And everybody seemed to have an idea. Did you find that? Did everybody come to you with, you got to try this, you got to try that? Or were you just,
Yeah, absolutely. Because even when you do your own web research, there are tons of different ideas and treatments. I went to doctors that had different ideas.
Mhm.
And, I just decided I would do the things that personally made sense to me. Not everything that's non-conventional makes sense to me. So,
Exactly. And there's a lot of things. Frankly, I've been in the natural medicine world for, like I said, a good 40 years. I make natural products and I work with all kinds of herbs and supplements and minerals and all kinds of things. But the truth is, there isn't one answer for everybody. And the thing that helped this guy over here may or may not help you. And half the people out there just trying to sell this thing, and maybe they have some evidence that it does a thing, but that doesn't make it so. There's so much misinformation. There's so much sort of bits and pieces of information. And then at the end of the day, you have to decide. And, you come to sort of, I don't know, I found that I came to learn my body really well. My body and I communicate extremely well now that I've dealt with this, where maybe before I didn't pay so much attention. Did you find that?
yeah. And there's so much individual variety that a medical doctor can't know about you as an individual.
Exactly.
I found recently that I was allergic to some antihistamine, and then my
Oh,
son was allergic to 3 sets of antibiotics he was given. And it's like,
wow.
it's not predictable.
Yeah, and the other thing too is your body changes. So,
Yeah.
I went through my young life allergic to these certain things, and then I outgrew them. And then later on, I became allergic to another thing. And it's like, well, what the heck? There's no rhyme or reason. You don't get a flag that says, hey, something's changing in there. It just changes. And all of a sudden you get a symptom, and then, you got to figure it out or you don't. I think most of us walk around with a lot of symptoms of things that we don't either notice, or they don't bother us enough, or we cover them up with a thing. And cancer hides underneath everything. It seems it'll mask itself, or you might have this symptom that you think is an allergy or a reaction to something, and it may be something entirely different. And I think, like, there's so many options. Like when you look up alternative cancer therapies, there's just like hundreds.
Yeah.
There's supplements and herbs and fruits and, you know, diet varieties. And, the first thing you hear about is, sugar, right? That's the big thing, and in this group that we're in, most people, I think, started it down that route. We go down, we cut the carbs and the sugar out, think we're going to starve the cancer. And we don't know anything about this methionine addiction. And it really doesn't matter. Cancer doesn't care if it's getting its methionine, it'll eat whatever you got. And so you got
Yeah,
a lot of
cancer
people.
has a tricky way of adapting. But, the methionine addiction of cancer is a universal hallmark of most cancers.
Yes, exactly. Once I discovered that, I started going, you know what? There are some pillars that I can
Hmm.
rely on. And I started really narrowing because I was doing everything too. I mean, I had all these different supplements and, drinking the teas and the diet and doing everything I could because I was going to do everything I could. But then after a while, I started going, okay, well, how do you know if this is helping you or not, right? You're taking
Hmm.
20 things and you don't know if you're really getting better or not, then it comes down to, and I think, Dr. Exume is really strong about that. It's like, well, what's the evidence say? Is there
Hmm.
is there something that says this helps everybody or most people? And so when it comes down to the diet and the things like the methionine restriction and oxygen therapy, and there's certain things,
Hmm.
cancer doesn't like oxygen. There's no cancer that likes oxygen. So you're like, okay, well, if you could oxygenate your body a little better, you're going to help yourself. You're going to create an environment where the cancer's not going to do so well. So there are certain things that I've come upon that I say, well, if I'm going to spend my time, because it comes down to like how much energy can you put to treating yourself, right?
Hmm.
I mean, that's one thing that's been difficult for me. It's like when it was going after me hard, I had to put everything on the side, and that's the only thing I did. Well, guess what? You could do a lot when you could dedicate your whole life to a thing. But then you start getting your life back, and all of a sudden you're like, how do you manage it all? And how did you manage all the different treatments and therapies along with the rest of your life?
Well, I did follow Dr. Exume's advice. I look for people who can show me the evidence.
Yeah,
Yeah. So show me that. So I would look at those papers that are on the web and, in PubMed, the
yeah.
NIH Medical Library,
Turns out
and
PubMed's quite a great.
great tool.
I searched everywhere, and then once we started getting on these calls and hearing about PubMed, I'm like, let me spend some time in there. And you're like, oh, well, this is actually evidence-based research, and it's
Yeah.
all different elements from clinical trials to published studies to every step along the way. It's all there, and at least that it has some sort of standard. You can't like I can't just come in as a layperson and say, here, I'm going to publish on PubMed. You have to have some
Right. Peer-reviewed
standard.
scientific journals. And
Right.
Dr.
Yeah.
Hoffman says the same thing. Where is the evidence? I
Yeah.
wanted to say something to your listeners too, though.
Yeah.
One other reason why I would question the conventional treatment is that the recurrence rates for many cancers are super high. Even for breast
Yes.
cancer, my cancer, it's like 30%. So
Yes.
it makes a thinking person say, if there's a 30% recurrence, then conventional treatments are not enough.
Exactly. Spot on. And it,
Right.
and it's so important to think like when they tell you these things, they don't give you that bit of
No, they don't.
knowledge. They just say this is what you need to do and follow it along, and it'll come in the papers or whatever. But you got to think for yourself a little bit.
Yeah. And I would also advise people who are going to do cancer treatment to look at every side effect or symptom of every treatment they do.
Yes,
And then you make the informed decision of what you're willing to risk and what you can put up with.
that is the best advice I could hear or give. Every single thing you do is going to have a positive potential outcome, and it's going to have a cost. And it may be a cost of a difficulty of managing a diet that's hard to follow, or it may be the side effects of chemotherapy, which I'm currently going through, and it's not fun. But when you say, okay, then what's that benefit going to be? Is it a sure benefit or a highly likely benefit? and you can risk it at, you can assess it. When it comes to the things like the radiation, that's where I draw the line. I was like, just like the surgery, it's like, well, unless, like, I know somebody who had a cancer um, that was completely encapsulated. They were able to completely remove it, and it was a result of, I believe, the cannabis oil he was taking, and it just made a big difference. The body wrapped it up in a mass, and the surgeon was able to just completely get rid of it. But generally, that doesn't happen. It puts tentacles in, and it goes into everything, and it just seems almost like there's no way that that's a good idea unless you can get it all, or you can cut so far away from it. Then what are you left with, right? You maim your body so badly that, is that worth it? And then radiation, same thing. Like, I don't know anybody who's ever gone through radiation that's like, wow, that worked out great. It
Yeah,
all
well, radiation can cause a secondary cancer.
exactly. And it generally does, and it causes all these side effects and lingering forever side effects, and it can knock the cancer out. But you look at the high likelihood of these problems and these potential other problems, and you have to look at that and say, well, if I don't do it and there's some other thing that I could do, I don't know. It just seems like logic would dictate that you might want to go down that road. It's a lot of work, though, and I think that's a big part of it. I think a lot of people, especially if you have cancer, it depletes you. I mean, it's a very draining experience, emotionally, physically, mentally, and to have to muster up the energy to go and do these difficult things while you're dealing with it. I don't think a lot of people have that wherewithal. I think that's a big reason why people just follow.
But I want to make a comment about the methionine restricted diet.
Yes.
So I know it's not the easiest diet to follow. It's a whole food, plant-based, low protein diet, basically.
Uh-huh.
However, I will tell you for decades, I tried to be vegetarian and vegan. I could never do it because I
Right.
come from like the typical omnivore family and,
Yeah,
always are having meat and seafood. But
sure.
once I got my cancer diagnosis, that was it.
Yeah. It
It
doesn't
was
matter.
like the sword of cancer hanging over my head. And I was,
Yes.
yeah, I think I will become plant-based. And it became easy because the
It's just a
decision was
choice.
kind of like, do I eat for life, for
Right.
healthy life, or do I eat to hurt myself or to encourage the cancer? And it was like, there was
100%.
no way I could, I was confused. It was like,
There's no
no, I'm going to eat
justification.
for health.
Exactly. 100%. It does make it
Yeah.
easy. You just have to decide, this is what I want, and this is what, and when you understand, though, I think once you get that understanding, like, I know that was the one thing when I made that switch and I says, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I watched this thing start shrinking. I watched this thing work. And that was the one thing I did. Like, that was the primary thing I did. All the other things I know helped, but I know that was the big thing. And the evidence is there. Everybody that has been on this diet, everybody that follows it has at very least some very positive results. And I think most of the people that don't have those positive results aren't following it. I think, frankly, that it really is a silver bullet, and it does make it easy. It's like, and you know what? I just got back from a vacation and I took a little brief break. I doubled up my methionase, and I just said, you know what? I'm going to have a hamburger. I haven't had a hamburger in 4 months. And I had one, and I had 4 doses of methionase afterward. And I said, to hell with it. One time, one thing. But I guarantee you, now that I'm back, I'm boom, right back on it, stronger than ever. In fact, I'm even fasting to reset, and I know that matters. I know that it works. And I think really that's the key to all of this. I think with general health, I think a lot of it is just making these choices. There are things we know that work, and we just have to make those decisions. I'd like to hear a little bit about your blog. I know we're running a little low on time, but I'm interested, and I'm going to be interviewing you for your blog. So I'm interested
Yeah.
in how, where do you go with that?
Yeah, so I just wanted a place where I could put down the things that I was going through on my journey, and I have some profiles of various people who have gone through the methionine restricted diet and been very successful. So, there's a profile of Jean Slattery and
Nice.
Blaine Lassane is on there too, and another people from the Nori side. I enjoy doing it, and I hope that I can compile this along with the scientific documents and make a really readable lay people's version of what we're doing, so it'd be accessible to more people.
I think that's huge. I think, we talk about this paradigm shift and, the science and practice of medicine is generally 10 to 15 years behind what the knowledge is. And this knowledge is getting out there. I mean, they just did a symposium and they're, have leading scientific experts talking about this. There's hundreds and hundreds of published papers. Dr. Hoffman published many of them, but the point is the research is out there. There is evidence, there's proof of this, and yet every doctor I've talked to, they don't even entertain it.
Well,
And
Joe, I will tell you there are thousands of science-based papers on
yes,
PubMed, not
yeah,
hundreds.
yeah,
And we've
absolutely. You're
actually
right.
known about the methionine effect on cancer since 1959.
Exactly.
So that's
Exactly.
a long time. But I kind of compare it to the tobacco and cancer controversy,
There you go.
right?
Yeah.
We knew about tobacco's influence on lung cancers in the 1920s and 30s, and basically nothing was done until the 80s. So that's like
Right.
50 more years.
And how many
Yeah.
people died and how many people could have lived? Well, I think that what we're doing is important, and that's the reason, why I talk incessantly about this every chance I get. And I love talking with people and sharing their stories, and especially, when you have a success story. So tell me about your current state. You've been cancer-free for how long now?
I guess about 2.5 years.
Nice, nice. And how
Yeah.
often do you get your test? When was the last time you had a test?
Yeah, I had a test in January, so later this month or early
Okay.
July, I'm gonna have another scan.
So how do you feel like every time you're about to get one? Do you still get a little anxious?
Yeah, I still get a little nervous.
Yeah.
It's
It's
called scanxiety.
yeah, totally. Totally. I hear you. I've got one coming up on the end of the month after, it's been since January since I've had one. And in January I had this giant lump sticking out of my neck and
You
and
look great, Joe.
I'm hoping, that what's left is dead and they're not going to find any activity and we're going to be on to a new chapter in this. But you talk about some scanxiety, I've got it for sure
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
Well, Cynthia, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. And, anytime you have anything you'd like to share on your health journey, you got a seat at the table here. I would like to give you your chance to share how anybody can get a hold of you, pitch your blog again, and anything you want to share.
Sure. Well, my website is cynthiachinley.com. And if you look there, you can see the blog is one of the tabs, so you can read the blog. And I really appreciate being part of this and sending the word out there that there are a lot of other ways to treat cancer than the standard protocol. And in fact, you need to go beyond the protocol.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia. And this has been another edition of the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and we will see you next time. This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.